How do we bring that understanding into our stories of how the world works? Because it's our stories that define roles for ourselves, that tell us what's important, that create meaning, and money is part of those stories. And we have a story in which this man's beautiful choice is irrational and a waste of time. And money reinforces that story because he's not getting paid to take care of his aging mother-in-law. And many, many of the beautiful things that we do, that we understand in our hearts are significant and valuable and important, there's no money in those things. And the money, contrary-wise, the money is in the things that violate. And I'm generalizing here, okay? Certainly there's a lot of social entrepreneurs that are working really hard to align money with the things that are beautiful to them. But the tide of money in most people's experiences makes it hard to do the things that you really love. And even when you're doing something you love and you get paid, then there's these compromises that you have to make. And the choice that maximizes the career advantage or the market acceptance or whatever, that's not the choice that's the most beautiful. And so how do we incorporate this understanding that you have in that moment of doing these meaningful things? How do you incorporate that into our story of the world? So, let me just, well, really what this is about reuniting our logic with our hearts. It's about reuniting spirit and matter. And it's about reuniting money with what's sacred. And that's what a new economy is, to me. It's how do we make money into something sacred? How do we make economic life into something sacred? How do we align it with what is beautiful and important and valuable and sacred to us? So, I will explain a little bit about how money works today. How many people were at the Hive last time I was in Vancouver? Okay, so only about a tenth of you. So I will go through this again. So here's a really basic explanation of how money works, okay? And why it's a force for evil today. Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to blame greed, you know? But you find that the more money you have, the greedier you become. It's not that the greedy people make a lot of money. It's that money makes you greedy. They did a study of millionaires, and to be in this study, I think it was Boston University or something. It was a wealth study, and to be in the study, you had to have a net worth of $25 million or more. And they asked, they gave you a questionnaire, and they said, one of the questions was, do you have financial security? And the vast majority of the respondents said no. How much would you have to have in order to have financial security? That was the next question. How much would it, And on average, they named a number 25% more than what they had, which tells us that no amount of money is enough. No amount is enough. And why is that? So I'm going to explain it. And so let's imagine that I'm a bank, okay? And I'm going to create money. And I'm simplifying this, but this is essentially how all money is created in our system. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of details about the difference between base money and M1 and M2 and all this stuff, but this will give you essentially an accurate understanding of our situation, okay? I'm the bank, and I am going to give everybody in this room $1 million. I'm going to lend you each $1 million. And if you, and you can use that to do great things. You can build a chocolate factory. You can do anything you want with this, but in 1 year, you have to pay me back $2 million. Every single one of you. And if you don't, then I will take all of your possessions. And you will have to spend the rest of your life paying me. Okay? But that's okay, because you're a smart person. You're going to use that $1 million to create goods and services, and you're going to sell them to other people in this room, and you're going to make $3 million. And you're going to pay me back $1 million of principal, another $1 million of interest, and you get to keep $1 million for yourself. Okay? And you're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to compete with everybody else, but you can do it, right? You're smart, aren't you? Well, does anyone see the problem here? This is how all the money is created. So basically, half of you, no matter how smart you are, half of you have to go bankrupt. Because everybody has $1 million, everybody owes me $2 million. There's more to the story, okay? But this is the first step. So you're all now in competition with each other for not enough money. Now, maybe before we did this, you're friendly and you're cooperating and sharing, but now, underneath all of that, everybody knows that we're in competition for this scarce thing. And so everybody's kind of your enemy now. Everybody's kind of your competitor. And you get along fine until it comes to money. And when it comes to money, then, whoa, don't take advantage of me. Then we're kind of suspicious. And everybody wants to get the best deal. Now, in the real world, and in our game, the story doesn't end there. Because in a year, when everybody has to pay me their $2 million, everybody can. Why can you? Because I've lent you each another $1 million. Or more. And this also comes with interest. And how is that going to get paid when those loans come due? Well, by then I'll have lent even more money into existence. And when those loans come due, I'll lend even more into existence. More and more and more, forever and ever and ever. So the system actually works as long as I keep creating new money. Now, who am I going to lend it to? Well, if you have a good business idea, you're going to create some new goods and services and sell them to each other, sell them to other people, then I'll lend you that money. But if you don't have a good business plan, if you can't think of a way to sell something to each other, then you don't get a loan. So only if more and more goods and services are being created does the system work. And I'm gonna shortcut this thing and basically say that the system works as long as there's some of nature converted to a product and or some of a relationship to convert into a service. As long as you can find something that people don't pay for and make them pay for it, then the economy is going to grow. And it could be through technology. For example, 200 years ago, people never paid for communication. But now with telecommunications, that's become a service. 200 years ago, people almost never paid for medical care because there were folk healers and herbalists. Every other grandmother knew how to heal with herbs. And that knowledge became professionalized. It became illegal to practice medicine without a license, and now that's something that we pay for. Childcare was something that we never paid for. Music. Everybody knew how to sing. Everybody knew how to play an instrument. And that's, through technology, become a service. Technology has allowed us to take new parts of the earth and turn them into products. And not just technology, but well, cooking never used to be a service much. You know, mom would cook dinner, And that's become a service. Play was not something that children paid for. The creation of imaginary worlds, the kingdom of childhood, cops and robbers, these worlds of the imagination. And now that's something that we buy from software studios or Hollywood. And so we've migrated from a world of relationship, from a world of gift, to a world of money. That's where the money comes from. And if your heart is not in that, if that's not what you want to do with your life, then you're not going to find a job. That's not where the money is. That's why there's not a lot of money in wetlands restoration. You're not going to get rich by pursuing a career in wetlands restoration, or permaculture, or animal rescue, or how about helping released convicts adjust to society? Does that pay as much as chopping down forests, paving over wetlands, hiring prison labor to make products, right? So you see the pattern here. You see how this agreement of money that says it is created as an interest-bearing debt. You can see how this creates the dynamics that we all live in, how it separates us from each other, and how it creates endless growth. And what we're transitioning to is a very different model, where no longer is the goal of economic life to extract as much as possible, but we see our economic lives through the lens of what can I give to the world. So now I'm going to take this a little deeper. Because the story of money, as I said, doesn't exist in isolation, but it's part of a bigger story. And I'm going to call it the story of the people. Every culture has a story of the people. And this story answers the deepest questions that a human being can ask. Like, who are you? What's the purpose of life? What's valuable? What's important? Where have we come from, and where are we going? What's the nature of reality? How does the world work? Every culture has a different answer to these questions. Our answer has been something like this. What you are, who you are, is a separate individual among other separate individuals in an external universe. You are this kind of bubble of psychology inside a flesh machine, bumping around against other bubbles of psychology in this external universe that doesn't care about you. It's not part of you. So you have to protect yourself. And security comes through controlling as much as possible of this external universe. And in this world, if you control more, that means I control less. So more for you is less for me. So we're all in competition with each other. And this answer to the question, who are you? Pretty much every field of human discourse has, in civilization, I'm not talking about indigenous people, okay? But I'm talking about like mainstream civilization. Everybody gives you the same answer, up until recently. So a kind of like psychology, like you're this mind, right? You're this consciousness in a body. Religion, you're a soul encased in flesh. Biology, you are a meat machine programmed by your genes to maximize reproductive self-interest. Physics, you're a mass operating according to deterministic laws, a bunch of parts bumping around together. Economics, you are an economic actor a rational man or woman seeking to maximize your financial self-interest, right? All of these different fields agree on what a human being is. But other cultures had a different answer to that. Their story of self was different. And they said something like, maybe what you are is the totality of all your relationships. What you are is a point of awareness. The same point of awareness as everybody else is. We're the same being looking in through different eyes. What you are is all your relations. And what you do to the world, you're doing to yourself. And everything you do to yourself has an effect on the world. And every relationship that you have and every action that you take is significant. That was a different story. And you can see that in that story, what the man and his taking care of his mother-in-law, what he was doing in that story is perfectly logical. It's not crazy anymore. What we're seeing today is a breakdown in our basic stories. I'll tell you one more, which would be the story of the people that says, what is humanity here? What's the purpose of humans on Earth? Why are we here? Where did we come from? Where are we going? And that story said, well, we started off as being these naked, helpless animals, struggling to survive, and then thankfully, thanks to our big brains, we developed technology, and we took over. We took control of natural forces. We harnessed them, and we transcended all limitations that bind other animals. And gradually, we became the lords and masters of nature. And the story says, we leveled mountains, we changed the course of rivers, we domesticated plants and animals, we developed machines. And someday, the story says, our control will be complete. Science will develop the theory of everything. And we'll extend our control to the molecular level, to the genetic level. We'll have bubble cities. We won't need nature anymore. We'll have gotten past that. We'll have risen above that. That's the destiny of humanity, according to this story. And by the year 2000, there will be no more disease. Like that's what they were saying in the 50s. And we'll have space colonies. We'll synthesize our food. I read a book when I was a kid, written in the 50s, that said by the year 2000, there will be no more insects. We'll have conquered the insects. But don't worry, pollination, we'll have synthetic food by then. By the year 2000, of course. We'll have synthetic food and maybe hydroponics, right? And so everyone believed in this story, but this story is obviously becoming obsolete. And the story of the separate self is becoming obsolete. And the entire civilization built on these two stories is becoming obsolete. And the money system built on these two stories is becoming obsolete. And that's why it kind of feels good when that premonition of disaster looms. Because we want to be free from those old stories. All of our institutions are built on them. Separation and domination, growth, ascent. Rising above nature. Even our spirituality is built on it. Raising your vibrations. Right? You're supposed to conquer the flesh, conquer desire. A spiritual person doesn't give in to pleasure, doesn't just do what he wants. You have to conquer nature, rise above nature, right? So it affects our spirituality, it affects our money system, it affects our medical system. It's about insulating ourselves from the microbial world and conquering germs and arresting the processes of life, controlling them. It's in our educational system, which kids can't just do whatever they want. They have to develop work habits, study habits, and conquer their profligate desires. It's in all of our systems. And as these two stories grow old and infirm and begin to fall apart, all the systems built on top of them are falling apart too. They're falling apart because they're not working anymore, and even scientifically, they're not working anymore. You know, the separate self in an external universe, that's Newtonian physics, where your effect on the universe is no more and no less than the amount of force you can exert, because that's how physics works. From Galileo and Newton, you know, the cart keeps moving until force is applied, and then it changes course. So if you want to change the universe, you have to exert a force, and guess what? That means it's hopeless, because the amount of force, the powers that be have way more force than you do. You're just one person. Nothing you do matters. Despair is built into that worldview. And when we limit ourselves to the methods of force, we can't accomplish anything. So, what's happening now is that the old stories and the systems built on top of them are falling apart, and that is giving birth to new stories. And it can't happen any other way, I don't think, except through this breakdown. An old world has to fall apart for a new world to be born. An old story has to fall apart. That's how it is for me. If my framework for understanding my life and for understanding the world still works for me, then I'm not going to change, usually. Like, I just keep doing it. As long as I can pretend that life is working, I don't change. And our society is the same. Right now, it's still possible to pretend that it's working. The financial elites, the political elites, you know, all we got to do is get economic growth started again. And things are okay, you know? Normal will come back. It's only when it's obvious that normal isn't coming back, you can't pretend anymore, that real change can happen. And that's another reason why we're looking forward to this disintegration of our stories, to the disintegration of our world. Now, for many of you in this room, you probably wouldn't be here, except that it already stopped working for you. Or maybe you're still kind of in that old story, and it's still kind of working, but you have a feeling it's not going to work much longer, and you don't really want to be there. Or maybe it already stopped working, and you're not in a new story yet. You're in that space between. Or maybe you're in a new story, but it's still a little bit fragile. And the thing I was saying to Nicole on the phone, you know, many of us, for decades, we've been living, or trying to live, from the understanding of the connected self. Because that's the new story of self, right? It's the self of inner being. It's the self of well, I described it already, that anything I do to the world, I'm doing to myself. Anything that, any relationship, any person in my life mirrors something in me. This is something that we can feel. This is why it feels significant to spend 6 hours a day taking care of an old lady, you know? And so many of us, in various ways, we're living our lives in order to be of service. Because in the world of the connected self, the purpose of life is no longer to maximize self-interest. The purpose of life is to give of your gifts towards something larger than yourself, which isn't really separate from yourself. And in the old world, that's crazy. And so anyone who's been living in the gift has felt a little crazy. Money has told us we're a little crazy. Our parents, maybe, or the internalized voice of authority says, you're naive, you're impractical. What good does it do? I was talking to Dagan today, and she had this moment. She's biking through the rain to deliver her compost to the city compost facility, and like, what good does that do when millions of other people aren't doing that? When climate change is happening, and there she is biking through the rain, one person doing that. What good does that do? And the rational mind can say, well, if everybody did that, then the world would be a lot better. But guess what? Newsflash, everyone isn't doing that. And if everyone were doing that, then it wouldn't matter if she did that, right? Yeah, like the mind of separation cannot find any reason to do that. It's insane. And everything worth doing today is insane.
Yeah. Amen.
But the logic of the connected self, that's not insane. From that logic of the connected self, it's not insane. It makes total sense. And that means that the heart and the mind, when we're immersed in the new story itself, the heart and the mind are no longer in conflict. We're still in conflict with money, more or less, because it's built on this old story. It embodies separation, it embodies endless growth. But that's changing. That's changing, and many of you in this room are among the people who are changing it. Pioneering, those of you who are social entrepreneurs, really what you're doing is you're saying, how can I use money as a gift? How can I use this as a creative tool to add to the beauty and health and harmony of the world? There's no guarantee that you'll make a profit doing that. Yeah. But if we someday, and I'm not going to get too much into these details of aligning money with ecological well-being and social well-being, but it has to do with internalizing costs and changing the way that money circulates and the way that money is created. Someday, money will come into alignment with what's sacred, and those who are doing it already are kind of creating a template for that. But it doesn't have to be with money. Anyone who is living even a little bit from this place of the connected self, from this understanding of oneness, is helping to create that template. It's not something I can, persuade you of. Like, I could maybe give you evidence that we're not discrete, separate selves in a world of other. I could tell you about experiments in social psychology, physics, new genetics. But really what brings us from an old world into a new world is an experience that doesn't fit into the old world. And everyone's probably had those experiences. It could be at the bedside of a dying loved one, or with maybe even if you had a near-death experience, or some kind of religious experience, or being in nature for a long time, or a psychedelic experience, or just being really moved by something, and at that moment it's just so obvious what the nature of being is, and it's so obvious what's important, and you think, I'm going to go back to my life, and I'm going to live from this place. But then you go back, and all of those old structures, they pull us back. we try to stay there. But no effort of will is enough to do it. Those experiences come as a gift. They're not something that we can manufacture. They are something that we can give, though. And so here's, if you're not a social entrepreneur, or if you are, it doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have. Here's a little piece of political advice. Okay? Given that the world that we know is built on the story of separation and the experience of separation, anything that you do to puncture that experience, anything that you do that doesn't fit into that story for another person, weakens the experience of separation. Any act of generosity doesn't fit into that story. Even hearing about generosity, even hearing about this man spending 6 hours a day taking care of a 95-year-old woman invisibly, like it kind of says to me, yeah, you know, the world isn't what I was told. Everyone's out for themselves. Look at what this man is doing. That data point doesn't fit into the world of separation. And when I receive generosity, it tells me, yeah, the world isn't a war of all against all. Or when I receive forgiveness or unconditional love,